Looking for an affordable used laptop shouldn't be this hard, but after a week of sifting through Craigslist, dealing with shady ads and people who ghosted me mid-conversation, I finally came across what appeared to be a good deal. A used laptop, barely touched, in good condition according to the photos, priced at $200. The seller, Dave, had uploaded a few clear images of the laptop, and honestly, it seemed genuine. No strange reflections on the screen, no stolen pictures from a product website, just a straightforward listing. Pickup preferred but willing to meet halfway. That worked for me. I didn't mind meeting face to face as long as it wasn't too far, so I reached out to Dave, and he responded quickly, which felt like a good sign. "Hey, I'm interested in the laptop, still available?" I messaged. "Yep, can meet tonight if you're free. Let me know where you're coming from, and we'll find a spot in the middle." His quick reply reassured me, though it felt a bit too eager. Maybe he just wanted to sell it fast, but I didn't want to overthink it. After all, I was getting a good deal. We agreed on a meeting spot, a 7-Eleven just off the highway, about halfway between where I lived and where Dave was coming from. It was a place I'd been to before, well lit with lots of people going in and out, so I wasn't too concerned. We planned to meet at 9 p.m., which wasn't ideal, but I was ready to seal the deal. I got dressed, grabbed my wallet, and checked the cash, 2 crisp $100 bills, before heading out. As I drove, a nagging thought kept lingering. Why did I need this laptop so badly? Maybe it was the price, maybe the feeling that I'd finally found something affordable that could still handle the tasks I needed it for. Either way, I was in now. The night was quiet, with few cars on the road. I had the radio turned down low, trying to focus. About halfway there, my phone buzzed. It was Dave. "Hey man, just wanted to give you a heads up," Dave said, his voice sounding a bit rough, like he'd just woken up or smoked too many cigarettes. "I'm having some car trouble. Had to pull off the highway, but it's nothing serious. I'm just down a side road about 2 miles from the 7-Eleven. I slowed down, processing what he said. My first thought was simple: great, this is going to be a hassle, but then again, car trouble happens. I asked for directions, and he told me to head down a narrow road that cut through some field. "I'll park near the entrance. You can't miss me," he added. "You can check the laptop, and if you're good with it, just drop the cash and we're set." Something about that didn't sit right. Why not just meet at the 7-Eleven like planned? But I didn't want to back out over something small. I agreed to head over. The further I drove, the more isolated it felt. The road Dave mentioned was a narrow gravel path, lined with tall crops on both sides. It was late enough that there were no other cars, no lights except for my headlights. I'd passed many farms before, but this place felt forgotten. No houses, no barns, just endless rows of cornfields. The stalks swayed gently as my car rolled down the gravel road. I slowed as I neared what I assumed was Dave's car, a beat-up pickup truck, parked at a slight angle just off the road. The headlights were off, and it looked like it had been sitting there for a while, with no signs of movement. I parked a few feet behind it, keeping my car running just in case, and glanced around, trying to make sense of the situation. No laptop in sight. I waited a minute, thinking maybe Dave was running late or had stepped away. But as the seconds ticked by, it started feeling wrong. I was about to call him when my phone buzzed again. "Hey, sorry, had to step into the cornfield for a second," Nature called. "The laptop's in the car. Just drop the cash and take it, should be good to go." The thought of someone lurking in a cornfield was unsettling. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I wasn't ready to back out yet. Maybe it was my pride, not wanting to feel stupid for driving all this way, or maybe I just didn't want to admit I'd made a bad decision. Either way, I pushed my anxiety down and got out of the car. The air was thick, still, and silent, only the rustling of the corn leaves in the breeze. I walked toward Dave's truck cautiously, glancing at the cornfield every few seconds, hoping to spot some sign of him. But there was nothing, just rows of tall stalks gently swaying. As I reached for the passenger door, I hesitated. There was no reason to trust this, no reason at all. Just before I opened it, I heard a soft rustling from the cornfield. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then it grew louder, more distinct, like someone moving through the field. I stepped back slowly, scanning the cornfield, looking for any sign of Dave. The rustling stopped, and for a moment everything went deathly quiet. That's when I saw it. A figure emerged from the cornfield behind me. The way they moved was strange. Too smooth, almost like they were gliding through the stalks. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just some guy needing a bathroom break. Something was off. I didn't wait to figure out what was going on. I turned and ran back to my car, hearing the rustling again, faster now, like whoever was in the field was coming after me. I jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the door. The headlights flickered on just as I saw two figures standing at the edge of the cornfield, staring at me. Neither of them moved. Without hesitation, I slammed the gas and sped down the road. I kept checking the mirror, expecting to see them following me, but they didn't. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something much worse than just a shady Craigslist deal. The road stretched endlessly, but eventually, I saw the lights of the highway up ahead. Relief washed over me as I pulled onto the main road, leaving the desolate farmland behind. I pulled into a diner a few miles down the road and parked, my hands still shaking as I cut the engine. I sat there for a while, trying to process what had just happened. The figures, the truck with no laptop. Had I been set up for a robbery or something worse? I blocked Dave's number as soon as I got home. There was no way I was ever reaching out to him again. The next day, I found a laptop at a pawn shop. Sure, it cost a bit more, but at least I didn't have to meet some stranger in the middle of nowhere at night. But I still think about that night, about those figures in the cornfield, standing there, motionless. I'm just thankful I didn't stick around to see how much worse things could have gotten. I had been trying to break into modeling for a while, nothing serious, just some small gigs, Instagram collaborations, stuff like that. But I needed professional headshots, something more polished to send to agencies. So, like any broke aspiring model, I started looking for photographers on Craigslist. I know it's not the safest option, but when you're on a budget, you don't have a lot of choices. That's how I came across Leo. His ad was simple. Professional photographer looking to expand portfolio, offering discounted rates for headshots. He had a couple of sample photos in the listing, and they looked legit. Nothing too flashy, just well-lit, clean portraits of people who didn't look overly posed. I figured it was worth checking out. I emailed him and he replied saying he had an opening later that week. We arranged to meet at his studio, which he said was in a part of town I wasn't super familiar with but wasn't too far from the city center. Everything seemed fine, and honestly, I was just excited to get some professional shots without spending a fortune. But looking back, there were a few things that should have been red flags. The day of the shoot, I drove out to the address Leo had given me. The neighborhood was not what I expected. It wasn't exactly rundown, but it had that abandoned warehouse vibe, like a place where businesses had thrived once but hadn't been touched in years. A lot of the buildings were old and crumbling, and there wasn't much foot traffic. Most of the shops were closed, with faded "for lease" signs in the windows. Leo's studio was in one of those buildings, a cramped two-story office that screamed 80s vibes like it hadn't been updated in decades. The paint was peeling, and the windows were covered with grime. There wasn't even a sign outside, just the building number, faded and barely visible. I double-checked the address he'd given me and tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. I almost turned around then, but I had driven all the way out there and I needed those headshots, so I parked and headed inside. The front door creaked when I pushed it open, and I stepped into what could generously be described as a lobby. It was small, just a desk with a couple of old chairs. There was no receptionist, no signs or artwork, just a plain, empty space that smelled faintly of mold. I was about to text Leo to let him know I was there when a door at the back of the room opened, and he stepped out. He was tall, maybe in his early 40s, with short hair and glasses. He was wearing a plain black t-shirt and jeans, and his demeanor was casual, friendly even. "Hey, Sophie, right?" he said, walking toward me and extending his hand. "Glad you made it. Come on in. The studio's just in the back." I shook his hand, my stomach still doing flips, but I smiled and followed him down a narrow hallway. The lighting was dim, and the floor creaked with every step. I kept glancing around, trying to take in my surroundings, but there wasn't much to see, just old, faded walls and a few closed doors. We reached the end of the hall, and he opened another door, leading me into a small room with a backdrop set up against one wall. There was a single overhead light and a camera on a tripod. It was basic, but I figured it would do the job. "Go ahead and take a seat," Leo said, gesturing toward a stool in the middle of the room. "We'll start with some simple headshots, and then if you're comfortable, we can do a few more creative poses." I sat down, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over me since I arrived. He fiddled with the camera, adjusting the lens and checking the lighting. I watched him for a moment, and that's when I noticed something strange. There were no other photos in the room, no examples of his work, no previous clients, nothing, just bare walls and that single camera. He must have caught me looking because he gave me this weird smile. "I usually keep things pretty minimal in here," he said, almost like he was reading my mind. "I find it helps people focus better." I nodded, not really sure what to say. The whole thing just felt a bit off, but since I was already there, I didn't want to look like I was freaking out. So I sat still and waited as he adjusted the camera and started taking a few test shots. At first, everything seemed normal. Leo clicked away, giving me directions like, "Chin up a little," or "Look off to the side." It wasn't until about 10 minutes in that things started to get weird. "Try loosening up a bit," he said after a few shots. "Maybe take off your jacket." It wasn't a strange request considering we were doing headshots, but the way he said it made me hesitate. His tone had shifted slightly, more insistent, like he was trying to push me out of my comfort zone without outright saying it. I took off my jacket, trying to keep things casual, but I could feel his eyes on me in a way that made my skin prickle. He started taking more pictures, but now his instructions were getting weird. "Turn a little more to the side now," he said. "Tilt your head down, look back at me, but keep your body angled away." I followed his directions, but something about the poses didn't feel right. They weren't headshots anymore. They felt more like something you'd see in a glamour shoot, and I wasn't prepared for that. I hadn't dressed for it, and I definitely hadn't agreed to it. "You've got a great figure," he said suddenly, his voice low. "Have you ever done anything more creative? Something a little more daring?" That's when it clicked. This wasn't just a headshot session. Leo had something else in mind, something he hadn't mentioned in his emails. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and my discomfort grew. I glanced at the door, realizing it was closed and the hallway outside had been dead silent. I tried to play it cool. "Actually, I think we've got enough for today," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm not really comfortable with going any further." Leo's expression didn't change, but his posture did. He stood a little straighter, his fingers tightening around the camera. "Are you sure?" he said. "We're just getting started. You'd be surprised how freeing it can be to step out of your comfort zone." "I'm sure," I said, my voice firmer this time. I stood up, grabbing my jacket from the stool, and moved toward the door. But Leo stepped in front of me, blocking the way. "Just a few more shots," he said, his tone darker now. "You came all the way out here. Don't you want to make it worth your while?" A sick feeling hit my stomach. I wasn't about to let this guy trap me in a room alone. I took a deep breath and squared my shoulders. "I'm done." There was a tense moment where neither of us moved. Then, without another word, Leo stepped aside. His smile never left his face, but there was something else in his eyes now, something that made my skin crawl. I left the room quickly, not bothering to look back. As I walked down the narrow hallway, all I could think about was getting out of that building. When I reached the front door, I practically threw it open and stepped outside, breathing in the cool evening air like I'd been holding my breath the whole time. I hurried to my car, locking the doors as soon as I got inside. I just sat there for a moment, trying to take it all in. Leo hadn't touched me, hadn't done anything outright dangerous, but the whole thing had felt wrong. The way he looked at me, the way he tried to push me into something I hadn't agreed to. It made my skin crawl. When I got home, I blocked Leo's number and deleted his emails. I didn't want to think about what could have happened if I hadn't stood my ground, if I had let him push me into doing more. I spent the next few days feeling uneasy, like I was being watched, but I knew it was just my nerve. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Leo wasn't just some guy trying to take pictures. There was something more behind his eyes, something darker. I reported the ad to Craigslist, but I never heard anything back. And to this day, I wonder how many other girls had gone to Leo's studio, thinking they were just getting headshots. Lucky for me, I didn't find out what he really wanted. I had just settled into my new apartment in Julian, California. Like most people trying to save a bit of cash, I spent hours browsing Craigslist for affordable or free furniture. You'd be amazed at the things people are willing to give away. A few days into my search, I stumbled across an ad for a Maplewood TV stand. From the pictures, it looked sturdy, well-crafted, and almost brand new. Best of all, it was free. The seller, Anna, didn't provide much detail in the listing beyond "pickup required, must take today." It seemed worth a shot. After all, it wasn't going to cost me anything. I sent a quick message to the number in the ad, asking if the stand was still available. The reply came almost immediately. "Yes, it's still here. Can you pick it up today?" I responded, "Sure, that works," and asked for the address. She sent it over but included a strange instruction. "I won't be home, but the door will be unlocked. Just go in and take the stand." That made me hesitate. Walking into someone's house when they weren't home didn't sit right with me. It felt off. But I didn't want to overthink it. People do odd things on Craigslist all the time, and it wasn't like I hadn't seen weirder setup. Maybe she had to work late or couldn't be there to meet me. Against my better judgment, I decided to go for it. The address was a bit remote. It was in one of those areas where houses are spread far apart, with open fields in between. It wasn't completely isolated, but it wasn't bustling with activity either. One of those places that feels fine during the day but eerie after dark. The drive started out uneventful. The roads were familiar, and I had some music playing to keep myself relaxed. But as I got closer, the atmosphere began to shift. The sun was setting as I pulled into the driveway of a modest suburban home that looked like it had seen better days. The yard was overgrown with weeds creeping onto the cracked pavement. There was no car in the driveway, just the house standing quiet and still. The porch light flickered faintly, as though it might burn out any second. Something about the house felt wrong. It wasn't anything specific, just a gut feeling, like being watched when you know no one's around. I stayed in the car for a moment, staring at the place. Then I shook it off. It was just a TV stand, and I'd be in and out. I texted Anna to let her know I'd arrived but got no reply. That didn't bother me too much. She'd already said she wouldn't be there. I stepped out of the car and walked up the cracked path to the door. True to her word, it was unlocked. I pushed it open, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. A heavy, stale odor. It wasn't awful, but it was clear the house hadn't been aired out in a while. I stood in the entryway, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light. The air felt heavy, and the silence was broken only by faint creaks that I assumed were from the old wooden floors. The living room was sparsely furnished, just an old couch and a battered coffee table. Against the far wall was the TV stand. It was bigger than I'd expected, made of solid wood, just like the ad said. It looked too nice for someone to give away for free. As I approached it, the uneasy feeling in my gut grew stronger. There were no signs anyone lived there, no pictures, no decorations, nothing to give the place a personal touch. It felt empty, like a shell of a home. Just as I was about to grab the stand, I heard it, a faint voice from upstairs. It was soft, almost like a whisper. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was the wind or the old house making noises. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. Hello? Is someone there? I froze. It was a woman's voice, but something about it was off. Too distant, too hollow. Anna. I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. My pulse quickened as I stared at the staircase. Anna had said she wouldn't be home, so who was upstairs? My instincts screamed for me to leave, but curiosity and fear rooted me in place. Then I saw it, feet. A shadow of someone standing at the top of the stairs, just out of view. The feet didn't move. They just stayed there as if waiting. Hello? The voice called again, but this time it sounded wrong. The tone was hollow, unnatural. It wasn't just the pitch. Something about the cadence felt off, like someone trying to imitate a woman's voice. Suddenly, the feet shifted, and heavy footsteps began descending the stairs. The door at the top slammed open, hitting the wall. My instincts kicked in, and I bolted. I ran for the front door, slipping slightly on the dusty floor as I reached for the handle. Behind me, a voice bellowed, deep and angry. Where do you think you're going? I didn't look back. I flung the door open and sprinted to my car, practically leaping into the driver's seat. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys, finally getting the engine to turn over. I sped out of the driveway, not slowing down until I was far away, surrounded by streetlights and traffic. Shaking, I pulled into a gas station and sat there for a while, catching my breath. I checked my phone. No new messages from Anna. I blocked the number on the spot. I thought about calling the police, but what could I say? That I heard a strange voice and saw feet at the top of a staircase? That I might have walked into a trap? I didn't want answers. I just wanted to forget. But even now, I can't stop wondering what would have happened if I'd hesitated just a second longer, or ignored the wrongness of that voice. Selling things online always carries some degree of risk. You can never be entirely sure who you're dealing with or what their true intentions might be. But I'd used Craigslist numerous times without any major problems, so when I decided to sell my old bike, it felt like the logical choice. I'd outgrown it in many ways. It was still in decent shape, just no longer suitable for the type of cycling I was into. I uploaded some pictures, wrote a detailed description, and set a reasonable price. Within a day, someone named Jeffrey reached out. He expressed interest and asked if he could come by to take a look. It seemed straightforward enough. I didn't overthink inviting him over. I'd done this sort of thing before. People showed up, checked out the item, and either bought it or didn't. Simple. But this time was different. Jeffrey seemed enthusiastic, messaging throughout the day with questions about the bike. How well it performed, if there were any issues, and what time he could drop by. I answered everything, and we agreed on 7 p.m. that evening. It was autumn, and the sun had already started setting by then, but it wasn't late enough to worry. The timing didn't bother me. An evening meeting felt convenient, fewer distractions, less noise. My neighborhood was safe, or so I thought. I didn't feel uneasy. I got the bike ready, gave it a quick cleaning, and placed it in the front yard. The evening air was crisp, with a light breeze carrying that distinct scent of fall. Around 7:10 p.m., a car pulled up in front of my house. But it wasn't just Jeffrey. 3 men stepped out. The uneasiness hit me instantly. Jeffrey hadn't mentioned bringing anyone, and none of these guys looked like the kind to be genuinely interested in buying a bike. They were large, broad-shouldered, and dressed casually. I tried not to judge too quickly. Maybe Jeffrey brought friends along for the ride. Still, something felt off. One of them, who introduced himself as Jeffrey, waved as he walked up, smiling in a way that seemed forced. His tone didn't match the friendly vibe from the messages. The other 2 men hung back, silent. "Hey," Jeffrey said, his eyes scanning the bike. "This the one?" I nodded, keeping my tone upbeat. Yep. Just tuned it up yesterday. Want to test it out? One of the other guys stepped forward, barely glancing at the bike. His attention was more focused on the house, particularly the front door. That's when the second guy spoke. Mind if I use your bathroom real quick? The question caught me off guard. It wasn't unusual for someone to ask during a sale, but it threw me nonetheless. Sure, I said, gesturing toward the door. Straight down the hall. I stayed outside, keeping my eyes on the two men while the third entered the house. They were trying to act casual, but their behavior seemed forced, as if they were waiting for something. Jeffrey kept talking about the bike, asking about past accidents, but he didn't seem interested in my answers. His gaze kept shifting between me and the house, as though he was expecting a cue. The guy inside had been gone too long. Anxiety began to creep in. Excuse me a sec, I said to Jeffrey, feigning calm as I headed into the house. The hallway was eerily quiet. No footstep, no sound of water, nothing. I peeked into the bathroom, it was empty. Panic hit. Where had he gone? I hurried toward the living room and saw the back door slightly ajar. Someone had slipped out. My heart pounded as I moved to investigate, but then I heard a faint creak from upstairs. He was on the second floor. He had no business being there. Adrenaline surged, and I bolted toward the front door. As I reached it, one of the men stepped into my path, blocking my way. He stood silently, arms at his sides, his expression unreadable. Everything okay, man? Jeffrey asked, his voice calm but laced with something unsettling. I think it's time for you guys to leave, I said, attempting firmness though my voice trembled. Jeffrey stepped closer. We're not done looking at the bike yet, are we? My instincts screamed at me to act, but I was trapped. One man upstairs, another at the door, and Jeffrey closing the gap. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from upstairs, followed by rapid footsteps. The man upstairs was no longer hiding. Without thinking, I lunged toward the side door leading to the garage. The man at the door tried to grab me, but I slipped past. I sprinted into the garage, frantically hitting the remote to open the door. As it began to rise agonizingly slowly, I could hear footsteps behind me, closing in. The door was barely halfway up when I ducked and rolled underneath, scraping my arms on the pavement. Scrambling to my feet, I sprinted toward my neighbor Jack's house, pounding on the door and shouting for help. After what felt like an eternity, Jack opened the door, startled. "They're in my house," I yelled. "Call the police." The cops arrived in minutes, but the three men were long gone. They'd taken some cash, my wallet, and an old iPad. Nothing irreplaceable, but they stole something far greater, my sense of security. The officers told me I was lucky. They'd seen scams like this before, thieves pretending to be buyers to scope out homes and strike when least expected. The fact I escaped when I did likely saved me from something far worse. 4 days afterward, I jumped at every sound. I couldn't shake the thought of what could have happened had I not run when I did. I never sold anything on Craigslist again. As for the bike, I ended up giving it away for free. If these stories had you feeling uneasy, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chilling tales. Which story gave you the creeps? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. Stay alert out there, and always remember, what looks like a great deal could turn into your worst nightmare. Share this video with your friends so they can stay safe too. Until next time, stay sharp and be cautious. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.